Great. So good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Kelly McDonald with Detail Roofing, and Michelle Wallace-Carswell is also on today. She is one of our account managers. And as the title suggests, we are going to be talking about bird issues and just kind of how they affect condominium complexes and what can be done to deter them. So just high level, some of the things we're going to be talking about today. For starters, we're going to be looking at what specific problems birds create at buildings and what should be done to address problems that they have caused, as well as looking at what the options are for deterring birds from coming to the building and creating these issues in the first place. At the end of the presentation, we will be doing an open forum Q&A. However, if at any point during the presentation you do have a question, please feel free to pose it in the chat and we will address it at the end during the Q&A portion. So what is the problem with birds? Again, especially at condominiums, they can, of course, be an annoyance to residents and to people in the area. We've even had situations while our technicians are working on various roof surfaces, whether it's for a bird issue or just doing other repairs or maintenance, where they have encountered some birds that are quite territorial and quite vicious and have had to deal with birds attempting to attack them while on the roof surface. So those are, of course, problems that they can create, but they also can cause damages to the building and pose quite a large health and safety threat to building residents and people walking by. So when it comes to birds where they're nesting or where they're perching, they really don't discriminate when it comes to these areas that they're congregating, whether it's detached houses, townhomes, low-rise or high-rise towers, or commercial facilities. Any building can be a target for birds. Some of the things that we see most often that can be an issue, one of the first one is building damages. So especially in cases where the building exterior is stucco, that tends to be where we see it most often, the birds can actually peck away at the building exterior and create various holes like we see in these situations here. Not only are these going to be areas where if they're left unattended, they can present issues with interior water ingress, but it can also be openings for the birds themselves or for other animals to infiltrate depending on the size of the holes. Typically, when we're seeing situations like this where there are damages being caused, it's not just a one-off situation. It tends to be widespread. We're seeing dozens of these holes throughout the building or throughout the townhouse complex. Another thing that birds can do very often, especially in cases where there's a single ply membrane, similarly to the building exterior, they can peck away at that single ply membrane, creating very small holes, which can lead to various leak issues. Again, if there are any openings, whether it's something that they have created or something that exists already, either from other animals or from wind damages, any sort of opening like that, birds can create nests just about anywhere. So it is something that we see often if there are any openings in the building exterior or throughout the building, and also in areas like gutters or overflow scupper drains. In areas where they are doing it in the gutters or the scupper drains, this can be a big issue as it can potentially block the drainage, causing water to back up and potentially create flooding situations. We also see them sometimes around vents, whether it's on sloped or flat roof surfaces, which can potentially disrupt the ventilation. And depending on where they're built, if it is somewhere that's near a heat source, then it can create a fire hazard. A huge issue with birds when they are especially congregating in large groups are the droppings that they leave behind. So as you can see here, not only are the excessive droppings unsightly, but there's also a number of other issues, one of which is the fact that these droppings are highly acidic. So if there is an excessive buildup, it does have the possibility of causing deterioration if left over time. So it can cause deterioration to shingles, to metal, to concrete surfaces. So getting that removed as soon as possible and preventing birds from creating excessive droppings like this should be top of mind. With the bird droppings, it's also something that, because they carry many diseases, if you are exposed to them and are breathing them in, it can also create a number of health hazards. It's a situation that you want to be mindful of where the droppings are occurring. We've seen situations where, even though it's not in an area that's frequented very often, you might think on the roof, out of sight, out of mind. However, we have seen situations where these droppings are built up around air intake units or air intake vents. Therefore, it does pose a risk to the building occupants if it is coming in through the ventilation system. In any cases where there are existing bird issues or where there might be any bird issues occurring, we definitely recommend keeping an eye out, whether it's during overall roof inspections or just regular walkthroughs that you're doing of the building, to try and identify any areas where there's damages to the membrane or to the building exterior, like some of the photos we saw that might be caused from birds pecking away. Any damages that are incurred from bird issues, we recommend getting repaired as soon as possible, just to try and prevent wider spread of damages and potential interior water ingress issues. In cases like, again, some of the photos we just saw where there is excessive buildup on shingles or metal flashings, if it has gotten to the point where deterioration is occurring, then replacing those areas may be recommended. If it isn't as excessive and the deterioration hasn't occurred just yet, it could be a situation where cleaning and removing those surfaces may suffice. However, an important note when it comes to cleaning and removing any bird droppings. Again, because of how hazardous this can be, it's very important that extensive care is taken when dealing with the removal. This is not a situation where you want to just send somebody up with some cleaning supplies to clean and remove these areas. In any of these cases, you want to ensure that the person doing the removal is equipped with full proper PPE, which would include protective suits, gloves, and booties so that there's not any contact with the droppings, as well as respirators. In this case, you wouldn't want just a standard run-of-the-mill mask. You would want a respirator because, again, breathing this in can be very toxic. Any tools that are being used for the removal, immediately following the removal, they should be bagged immediately so that they can be properly cleaned and sanitized before they are used again in any way. So some of the solutions or options when it comes to preventing and deterring bird issues. First and foremost, you want to avoid attracting birds to the building and making them comfortable. One of the things that we hear very often, and I know this can be very difficult to control at times, is when residents are feeding the birds, whether it's from their balconies or just outside the building. If birds know that they have a guaranteed food source, they are going to continue to return to that building. So whatever you can do to prevent anybody from feeding the birds, definitely want to put that to a stop. Also, birds are always going to find somewhere to perch or to nest. So the idea is you want to make your building less desirable than all of the surrounding buildings so that they're not causing issues at your particular building. When it comes to identifying a solution, it's not a one-size-fits-all situation where a particular deterrent system that worked at one building is going to work at the next. It is going to be dependent on a number of factors, especially because there are so many options out there. So not only the location of the building, but the specific issue that is occurring, the specific type of birds, and what issue it is that they're creating. We have seen many cases where trial and error may be required to find the system that is going to be the right fit and that's going to prevent birds from causing any issues, especially because birds can be very adaptable. It could be a situation where multiple systems may have to be used in conjunction, or a few different things may need to be tried. So again, there are a wide variety of options out there. The ones that we're going to be looking at today are the ones that we see most often, especially when it comes to condominiums, and those are spikes, nets, electrical tracks, sonar or sound systems, decoys, and spiders. So first up is bird spikes. So these are installed along the edge of the roof surface. And the idea is to prevent the birds from landing and perching in these areas. As far as the installation goes, it can either be installed with an adhesive or with fasteners. It is important that if you are having spikes installed and fasteners are being used, you want to ensure that those fasteners are being properly sealed and that the sealant being applied is being renewed and maintained over time, because creating that hole will present a potential water ingress issue. Adhesives would also be something that you want to stay on top of and maintain regularly, just to ensure that the system is going to last and stay in place. So looking at some of the pros and cons of this system, the pros are whether it is with an adhesive or with fasteners, these are very quick and easy to install, relatively low maintenance required over its lifespan. Some of the cons is that it can create an eyesore. So if visual appearance is very important and more important than the issues that the birds are creating, this might not be the right solution. It also might not help to deter any smaller birds that would still be able to land or rest outside of the areas where the spikes have been installed. Another common one that we see, and a very, very good system overall, is bird netting. So this is especially good in any localized roof areas or any partially enclosed spaces where birds may be landing or entering and creating various issues. The one nice thing about this system is that it's very versatile. It comes in a wide variety of different materials. It can be installed vertically, horizontally. If it is an area where the netting is being installed that needs to be accessed regularly, there are options for zippers to be installed so that you still can have people going into these areas without having to fully take down the netting every time somebody needs to enter an area. Similarly with the bird spikes, relatively easy to install, no need for any additional trades or extra contractors. Some of the cons with this, it can be a more expensive option, especially if you are looking at heavier duty netting or situations where there are zippers or other things involved. Again, fasteners would be required for this one. So you are creating penetrations throughout the installation area that are going to need to be regularly inspected and maintained to ensure that any sealant is up to date and not deteriorating and causing potential leak issues. Something that is a more sleek option would be an electric track. So similar to the roof spikes, it's something that would be installed along the roof edge. This one does send a small shock when the birds land to try and condition them from not landing in that spot. However, unlike the bird spikes, it's not going to create this big visual eyesore in the installation area. So that low profile, definitely a pro with this system. However, unlike the two systems that we looked at, this is something that requires an electrical connection. So the costs associated with that are greater, and it does require an electrician's involvement to make sure that there is a power source nearby. Regular maintenance is required to ensure that everything is regularly working as intended, and that the electrical component is functioning as intended. The sonar sound system, in our experience, is something that can be very hit or miss. So what these systems do, they emit a sound. You can change the sound. There are many different options, but typically it's going to be a sound that imitates a bird's natural threat. Again, like the electric track, this is something that is sleeker. It's not going to create a visual eyesore. The boxes that they come in are typically weatherproof and made to be outside. However, it is still something that you would want in a protected area just to ensure that it's not being damaged in any way. It's something that, there are capabilities to have apps on your phone and control it from your phone or a localized place. It's very easy to adjust, have it set to different times. It can deter a vast number of birds and cover a large area. However, some of the pros, although it's not creating a visual eyesore, it can, of course, create a nuisance with the sound. We do have a situation in our head office in BC where one of our senior estimators had a sound system at the building where he lives, which was doing an effective job at deterring any birds. However, because of the angle that it was pointed and the time of day when the sounds were going off, it was causing complaints from a neighboring building because of the sounds that it was creating. Also, because of the sounds, this is something that could be a bit of an issue in dense urban settings where you are getting a lot of other noises. So it's something that maybe need to use in conjunction with another system, or make adjustments to fit the particular situation that is occurring. So next up, we have decoys. So these are either small things like we see here, like a little animal that, again, emulates a visual or a threat of the bird that is causing the issue, or it can be a balloon. So these are, again, going to hopefully deter birds from landing because they think it is an actual threat to them. So these ones are very easy to install and highly effective at deterring birds. However, again, depending on how many you have and the size of them, it can create quite an eyesore. And over time, birds may be able to adapt and get used to them and determine that it isn't, in fact, a real life threat, but it is a decoy. So this option we don't see as often, but it would be something that may be useful in smaller roof areas, potentially elevator rooftop, small canopies. So this one is a spider. Similar to the bird spikes, it's going to prevent birds from landing or perching in unwanted areas. However, like a spider, it has many legs stretching out. It moves in the wind, which is great, especially in high wind areas. It's going to have flexibility to move around. It is very easy to install. However, again, because of the movement and the size of it, it's something that may not always be effective, especially in cases with smaller birds. And it is something where the birds may be able to adapt over time and identify times or areas where they can still come in and perch or nest. So no matter which type of deterrent system is going to be best for the particular birds or particular building, it is important that to extend the life of the deterrent system, you do need to be performing regular inspections and regular maintenance on the system, just to ensure that it's not going to get to a situation where there is breakage occurring or spikes are falling off. whatever the case may be. Depending on the system, there would be instructions on what type of maintenance and inspections would be required. So just making sure that you're staying on top of that will be the most effective way to ensure that the deterrent system is lasting as long as possible. And so just before we jump into our Q&A, just a quick overview. So again, unattended bird and pest issues, not only can it be an annoyance, but it also can cause building damages, health and safety risks for a variety of reasons. Completing regular inspections and maintenance and identifying those issues before they become too major can be helpful just to prevent any larger issues. And when it comes to the deterrent systems, again, not a one-size-fits-all solution. Sometimes some trial and error or use of multiple systems may be required to ultimately deter birds from creating issues at buildings. Okay. And so if anybody does have any questions at this point, please feel free to unmute yourself.
I have a question. That electrical thing, it's not harming them, right? It's just like tickling their feet a little bit.
Yes. So from our understanding and from times that we've used it in the past, it's not something that's going to zap them and cause any like long-term damage. It's not something that's going to kill them or anything like that. It's just a small shock for conditioning.
Kind of like a shock collar for dogs.
Dogs, yeah, like
Similarly.
dog shock collar.
My second question would be, what would be best to deter little birds like sparrows?
Are they like, I think it would kind of depend on the specific issue. Like, are they perching on the...
I've seen them grow in numbers lately, so I just want to make sure they're not going to get too comfortable and find. So we have a few trees in the backyard. Sorry, in the little courtyard, and I started seeing more of them. So I just want to make sure they're not, getting too comfortable.
We can reach out to one of our suppliers and ask for specifically for sparrows, if you'd like.
They're like really small, and they don't, they don't land on like on the roof or whatever. But I just don't want them to start making their way into like canopies and stuff like that. Because we have.
Yeah, we can definitely reach out.
Yeah.
Find out. Sparrows are not something that we get complaints about on a regular basis, so we can definitely reach out and get back to you.
All right, thank you. That's it.
Caroline, in regards to the sonar system and whether or not that stays up year round, it definitely can. Again, a lot of these boxes are weatherproof and need to be installed outdoors. So it is something that can stay up year round.
If anybody's having any specific bird issues or anything that they want us to review, sort of as Kelly mentioned, every building and situation is very unique. So, and it is always a bit of a trial and error process. So just let us know, and then we can take a look at it and see what maybe a first step would be.
Okay. If there are no other questions, we will wrap up here. Later this afternoon, I will send out an email. So again, if there are any specific issues that are occurring at your building that you would like to inquire about or have somebody come out and take a look, we would be more than happy to do so. Also, there will be a recording of this webinar attached if it is something that you want to view again or share with any of your peers or any of your boards if you are having any bird issues. Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye, ladies.
Bye.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you very much.